Hello, my fellow seekers. Welcome to Into the Work, therapy for empaths, seekers, and the intuitively driven, where you have front row seats to therapy sessions and expert interviews that will help you define the important work that you're here to do. So I guess you actually have something better than front row seats. You practically have a seat on my couch. That's right, you will have unrestricted access to actual sessions with real people, exploring real life issues. You will continue to be inspired by powerful conversations with experts and healers that might just share exactly what it is that you need to hear to get unstuck. I am Michelle Pauverman. I am a recovering people pleaser and former anxiety-driven empath, turned now mostly grounded psychotherapist and intuitive coach. I have been helping people for almost 20 years manage their limiting beliefs and anxiety to finally stop the self-sabotage and step into their gifts. I created this podcast, Into the Work, to give you a place to learn more about yourself and give you actionable strategies to finally move those roadblocks holding you back so you can go for what you want. Above all else, my hope is that this podcast is a catalyst for your awakening. If you're listening, you've already taken a step towards getting off of autopilot, and our next steps together will be taken episode by episode, waking you up to the possibilities, the new ways of thinking and being, so that you can stretch into that next level of your story. The spark has already been lit, and my friend, this is a journey from spark to brilliance. So together, let's light a fire. Hello, and welcome back to the show, Into the Work. We are covering part 2 of people pleasing today. So if by chance you missed part 1, where do you fall on the spectrum of people pleasing? You might want to jump back and start there. Both of these are standalones also on their own, so it's okay if you move forward, but it certainly might be helpful if you start with one. Either way, let's move forward. Today, we're going to walk through some key signs that people pleasing is alive and well in your world, or not. And this will help you identify where you are at with it right now and what areas you're still getting triggered in. I put this episode together to really help you kind of take a look at some of the nuances. Like, I'm going to say things that you can Google and find out on your own. But I want to just identify a couple of the nuances that are examples of how this might be showing up in your life. But this way, you can know where you need to put your energy so that you can shift your focus. And by this, I mean you are an energetic being. Where you place your focus is where you place your energy. It's where things will shift. Based on this, I want to say that this podcast today is not meant to have you now obsess over these things that you're doing quote unquote wrong. Quite to the contrary, its purpose is to show you where you might be leaking energy and feeling low. Because we get on autopilot as humans here, we do all sorts of creative things to deal with the painful stuff in our life. This episode is to help you see where you took a turn in order to manage the difficult situations that are occurring or do occur in your life. It's to show you the route back to love. In the end, it is your divine purpose to align. So this is not about getting stuck in, look at what's wrong with me, getting overwhelmed, with all these things I'm doing that are wrong. This is about finding out what is getting in the way of radical love and acceptance so that you can recognize it and heal it through practicing radical love and acceptance. This is the answer. Love is always the answer for everything that you want to heal. And so I want you to also catch yourself making statements of grandiosity about how awful this is, how you'll never get to fix this, how deeply screwed up you are, or anything like that. We're all screwed up. That's part of being human. So last week when I discussed how painful it can be to attempt, this is in part 1, I discussed how painful it can be to attempt to focus all your energy on setting boundaries without focusing on the self-love part. and aligning with the greater meaning of your journey here, I really meant it. That's the hard way. Not doing the work on self-love and acceptance and trying to plow through this stuff without that is the hard way. It's the painful way. And as we journey through today's episode, please remember the easy way. The more and more you love and accept yourself, the more you tap into your divine access to love and all that's greater than you, the more healed you are, and the more this stuff just rolls off your back. So when you catch yourself doing this stuff, you can work on a different way to respond to it. That's part of the work. It isn't just noticing the stuff and somehow healing the stuff. It really is trying to work on showing up with a new response that's forgiving and loving and reassuring that you are worth all the good stuff that's kind of come out of your work here, right? We have to reparent ourselves. Even if you had wonderful parents, they're still human, right? We just need to shift our inner voice to create thoughts that are supportive, forgiving, loving, and reassuring. That is part of your process. So before we get started, I wanted to share a story with you that I think will highlight how far I have fallen on the people-pleasing rabbit hole. And so I think it was about 8 or maybe 9 years ago. I think it was about 9 years ago, my husband and I decided to take on a large landscaping project. We had a decent sum of money to re-landscape the entire front aspect of our house. It was a relatively newer house. We'd been there a few years. And we hired somebody that came in and he wowed us with his plans. I mean, this guy, he came in and he had, the architecture of landscaping. I mean, what he put in front of us was quite beautiful. We were so impressed. He had this way about him he was awkward. He was a little weird, but he liked to step to his own beat for sure. But he definitely had a way of manipulating us and making us both, my husband also, wanting to make us both, want to please him, right? To make him want us as his customers, right? He had this way of digging in and manipulating it so that we really wanted to make sure he was happy. So I know it sounds crazy, but when I tell you, you guys buckle up because this man was a thief, a liar. He was exactly everything he needed to be to kick me in the ass and wake up. I would caught him at one point coming in and he had talked me into moving all these plants I had in my backyard into the front yard. And I said, okay, sure, right? You're the expert here. Great. I caught him putting 50% of those plants. I mean, he probably had about 20 plants that he was putting into the back of his truck. I looked at him and I said, what are you doing with those? And he said, oh, I didn't think you wanted them. And then acted like I was making a big deal of it, right? And then it went on and on, the lies, deceit, every single thing from a plant that he put in. He said it would be 5 feet. Turns out it was a miniature plant. It would never grow beyond 2 feet. Everything he did was to upcharge us and to lie and to steal. And oh my gosh, every single week it went on and on. The stress we felt was insane. And so I want to ask you, what would you do in this situation? Listening to this story, you're probably thinking, I would have kicked him to the curb, right? And that's what I would say. Now that's what I would do, I think. But, or I believe, based on where I'm at now, is very different. But when dealing with this guy, what I did was what a lot of people who are people pleasers tend to do when they are triggered by their trauma response. And when I call it trauma response, having a landscaper is not trauma. I realize that. Even having somebody do the things that he was doing was not trauma. However, I have a response in my body that is preconditioned and revved up and ready to go when I needed it. And that particular situation was calling on my trauma response, my nervous system response, which is to fawn. Now, I don't know if you know fight, flight, freeze, fawn, but you very well know the fight or flight. The freeze is obvious too. You kind of freeze up. And the fawn is when you start to work really hard to get that other person. When you're faced with the discomfort of rejection, abandonment, when you're faced with conflict and you're really uncomfortable with that conflict, your go-to, the nervous system, the brain and how it's working, all it wants to do is to make this end, is to get them on your side. And so we fawn as a way of people pleasing, as a way of getting them back on our side, right? And so this was a way that I felt I was going to show up and I was going to make him want to work for me and be honest with me. And if I did all these things, then surely he'd like me enough and he'd stop lying and he'd stop cheating and he'd stop doing everything that he's doing. It never stopped, of course. But I caught him stealing all those plans. I caught him lying left and right about things. And what did I do? I went out to the store and I bought his entire team ice cream sandwiches. I bought them all ice cream sandwiches. And you know what he said in response to that? Hey, love. I was headed out to the grocery store and I was letting them know that I was leaving. And he said, hey, love, are you passing a Dunkin' Donuts on the way home? We could really use some coffee. And I literally froze. And then I could feel my face getting hot. I didn't know what to do because that was just way too much for my nervous system to take on that conflict because of the emotions I was feeling were so big. I literally just said, okay, sure. And I bought him and his whole crew coffee and he went on to steal, lie, and cheat. And oh my gosh, the sleepless nights were unbelievable. But that was a wake-up call. I mean, when that job was over, I think me and my husband slept for the first time in, months. So basically, what I'm trying to share with you here is a lot of the things I'm going to tell you are in that story. A lot of the things I'm going to tell you are these nuances of ways in which we have this programming and these triggers. And like anybody who knows me now, their jaw drops when they hear the story. You bought them coffee? Yes, I did. Because that's all I knew what to do. And, and I'll get into, it will come up as we talk, all the different things in which you can see yourselves in this. So, you still have work to do if you often say yes when you want to say no. That's the big one we talked about in that part 1. So I want to just get into the nuances of this a little bit, but you find it hard to decline requests, right? Like getting coffee, even when you're already overwhelmed or uninterested. You still can't find it, the words in you, all your system wants to do is make it go away. That's how it feels. I just need to make it go away. And so this conflict, this feeling, this overwhelm, this discomfort, I need to make it go away. And your way of doing that is say yes. So you might want to question, are you avoiding situations that may press you to set a boundary and then fear you will be overwhelmed because you can't trust yourself to set a limit and say no? So it's hard to enter into situations where you might have to set a limit. And so you might be living a very safe life, and we'll talk more about that. I mean, this is a red flag, even for people pleasers who call themselves people pleasers in recovery. Sometimes when we say we are recovered, we've just gotten really smart on avoiding situations that will be uncomfortable. So I want you to check in with yourself and see if you might be doing some of this hiding. And since we aren't challenging ourselves and putting ourselves in situations that require you to have to set a limit and use your voice, you might be thinking, I'm doing so much better, right? Also, ask yourself if there are certain relationships in your life that are harder than others to say no to. And how are you dealing with that right now? I know this guy, for me, he is the epitome. Like, honestly, as a therapist, I learned real quick, real fast, I cannot work with sociopaths. Not that I want to, but I dabbled in it early on in my career. And I worked with gang members. I did a lot of different stuff. And I learned they get me. I become the rabbit and they are the lion and they're going to eat me. So I realized fast that is not my work. It's not my circus, as they say, not my monkeys. And so I just honestly, I had to really own that. And so it's important for you to take a look at what triggers you. What kind of people trigger you? Some people really draw a lot of worth from being the savior, which I know we talked about in part 1, and overgiving and going above and beyond for friends or colleagues. So situationally, you could also look at, whenever you feel challenged to win someone over, or conditions are such that trigger you to feel like you have to prove yourself in some way, that's probably a situation where your people-pleasing is going to jump out. A good habit to increase self-awareness is to take non-judgmental inventory at the end of your week. So when did you not say no when you really wanted to? So many of us are on autopilot. We just shove it down. It becomes a regular part of our day and we're not even paying attention to it. So start bringing it to light. And then big step is, or 2 big steps are, first, decide now. What are some examples of how you could have said no? Many times we have to prepare that language ahead of time. Like, you're not going to find it when you're in there flooded with angst and wanting the discomfort to be over as soon as possible. You're not going to find it when you're under pressure. And so, or you might, but it's harder. So if you can prepare some statements that are really simple and easy to just pull from your toolbox, where you can say something like, I'd love to, but unfortunately, I really just don't have the time for it this week. Or, I'm going to have to put a pause on that. As much as I enjoy doing this work together, I'm spread too thin. You're learning how to say things in a kind, again, graceful manner that you can say it and also be clear. The other thing I want to say, one more thing, is when it's looking at what you're going to say, I want you to look at how you're going to say it. And that is how you're going to respond. I want you to slow down whenever you feel the ping of being asked to do something that brings up some anxiety in you. Anytime anxiety gets brought up in you when somebody asks you to do something, or discomfort, a feeling of discomfort, I want you to slow everything down. I really want to challenge you to take the time you need before answering. Ask for that time. Let me get back to you. Learn to take the time to sit with it. Check in. How do you feel about it? Get clear on that. And that's a really big step for people pleasers, is to start learning about how you feel, right? That's not always an easy, accessible thing, because we get flooded with all the I have to's and I shoulds and all the things, and we miss out on that opportunity. Okay. And so I really want you to practice that. I also want you to practice declining invitations that don't interest you, right? All right. Number 2, you regularly seek approval from others, right? You regularly seek approval from others. You feel uneasy or anxious when you don't receive praise or positive feedback from others. So now this can particularly be true when we make new friends. I want to keep this in mind. Sometimes new friends, new colleagues, or certain situations can feel like a clean slate opportunity to show people how special and giving you are, to sort of, again, win them over. If this is you, you will likely place greater attention on going above and beyond your new friends, your new partners, not new partners, but maybe new partners, new friends, new colleagues, like new situations versus, your same old family, right? Like the people who know you well. So, or old friends, right? So I really want to highlight here that for people pleasers who have a strong drive for approval, it can be hard to be willing to give up that high of receiving that approval, or that high that comes from being the savior. We talked about this in part 1, but it makes us feel special. So I want to make sure it gets highlighted here too, because it's a really important concept that we need to understand about ourselves. That being that person who delivers what anybody needs, getting to save the day, all that, it's a temporary high. It's hard to give up because we spent a lifetime working so hard for it. And many times we don't feel good until we get that reward of being appreciated. However, in the same light, we can many times experience appreciation as a commodity in the transaction of people-pleasing and overgiving. So remember, if it's people-pleasing, you are doing it out of obligation. You have to, guilt, you should, angst of being enough for others, fear of rejection, disappointment, But there is that high you're reaching for of being appreciated. That's when everything shuts down and feels so good. And when I say shuts down, I mean that anxious feeling you're feeling gets shut down and you get calm. And when it's not part of the exchange, if appreciation is not part of the exchange, you can feel gypped. I sacrificed and they didn't even appreciate it. That's how it can feel. So we want to hear, oh my God, you are a lifesaver. You're amazing. That's such good stuff. That's what we are after. And when we don't receive any appreciation, you may be left feeling super resentful or angry for being unappreciated, and it can really lend itself to resentment. Now, I am certainly not saying that appreciation is not an important part of a healthy relationship, but I'm trying to show you the attachment you have. It's like the carrot dangling. It's what you're working for because of the wound of a not enough or not worthy. And that is different, right? So that is why shifting your why and having more self-awareness around your motivation to help can be game-changing. So once you can decipher between a genuine, open-hearted desire to help versus obligation, you're no longer looking for the dangling carrot of appreciation. But that is actually hard. A lot of us trick ourselves. We say, oh no, I'm doing this from an open heart. Of course I am, right? But no, we're doing it from obligation. I have to, I should, all the things. And by obligation, I also will say here too, when people have a strong, I have to do this, nobody else will. I also relate it to compulsion. It can be a compulsive behavior. The anxiety comes in and the compulsion is to fix it through I have to's and I shoulds. But that's another aspect of it. If you feel irritated that people are not appreciating you, this is a great way for you to recognize that you have been people-pleasing. So just do inventory. Have you felt irritated that people are just not appreciating you? And does it come from, potentially, this wound that we're talking about here? Remember, it's not about feeling bad and powerless with yourself or bad and powerless with these old habits that you have. These habits are present because at one time they really served you. So I don't want you to get caught up in beating yourself up over them. I just am saying, hey, let's wake up now and evolve, right? Let's ease and find our sense of love and our sense of knowing that we are good internally and no longer get into this trap of external validation. So number 3, do you compromise your values or beliefs to keep the peace? So you agree with others just to avoid conflict, even when it goes against your personal beliefs or values. So maybe you pretend to like things that you don't like, or maybe, you have political beliefs, and this is rare these days because politics are so loaded. Maybe you just kind of like to keep the peace. You just keep quiet in a way that, is sort of against your values. It's okay to decide where you want to spend your energy. And I want to say this clearly. It's okay to set a boundary and withdraw from a conversation where differences in opinion are not respected. That is okay. It is okay to be like, no, I'm good. I'm not going to, I see what the trap that's in front of me, and I have no interest in engaging in that. But pretending to share the same views on something when it's not true, just to avoid feeling rejected, is people-pleasing. Also, discounting your own values to keep the peace. Maybe dismissing yourself or being self-deprecative in a way to keep the peace. A lot of people do that through humor too. Like, what do I know? People can be self-deprecative and make light of their values and beliefs in order to keep the peace. Another one, number 4, is do you avoid expressing your true feelings? Start over. So here you hide your true opinions to avoid disappointing or upsetting other people. The question then becomes for you, how much stuffing are you doing? Do you walk around on eggshells? How often are you avoiding sharing your true feelings, especially in intimate relationships? Some people will say, well, Michelle, I've learned it's just easier. My partner doesn't want to hear it. And if I talk about it, they dismiss my feelings, tells me I'm being too sensitive, denies that I'm feeling what I'm feeling, and that any of my feelings are valid. So it's just easier. So here is the deal that I want to say to you is if you are in a relationship that you're not safe to express your feelings, then it's time to seek outside help. And I just want to make sure you hear that because some of us people pleasers can catch ourselves up in this situation and we can shut down and not feel like we can stand up for the fight. So, and when I say fight, I mean really stand in your power, stand in your place and say, I don't need to change. I know me. This is true for me. And I want to share it with you. And finding the right words to do that through counseling or coaching or whatever. So that can be really helpful. Number 5, do you feel guilty when putting yourself first? This is a big one for people pleasers. It's definitely one you've thought of before, I'm sure. But let's redefine putting yourself first. And I might have said this the last time, but it really means you matter as much as someone else. It doesn't necessarily mean you matter more than someone else, but you matter as much. And here's the distinction. It is your job to take care of yourself and your needs, and it is their job to take care of themselves and their needs. And when we do a good job and take care of ourselves and set limits, then we can be so generous. We can be so open-hearted. We can truly want to give as a form of joy. But when you live in a world where you're trapped with guilt and shoulds and have tos and all that, it's this cyclical feeling of I'm eventually going to become an empty vessel, and now I'm going to start getting angry and I'm going to start getting resentful, and I'm going to lose sight of being a generous person because I don't know how to manage this. And it's going to hurt the relationship. So taking time for self-care or prioritizing your needs, probably, if this is you, if this is still happening for you, it's probably leaving you feeling a little selfish. Like, gosh, am I selfish? Am I just being selfish? Then you probably are struggling with people pleasing still, right? This is an area that if you're starting to feel a little guilty when you try to prioritize your needs, the goal is to feel compassion and understanding for yourself and the others involved, with knowing that your job is to meet your needs so that you can remain healthy and well, so that you can be a giving, loving vessel and allow the light to come through you and from you. So it's just something to keep watch on, is how much guilt are you letting through? I want you just to try showing up for it. Again, slowing down, taking a moment, sit with it, recognize it, find a loving, caring response to say to yourself, like, it's okay. Of course, you felt guilty your whole life. It's okay that you still feel guilty, right? Forgive yourself for being imperfect in this whole people-pleasing business, and just allow love to come in and allow yourself to recognize that when I set a boundary, when I stop people-pleasing, I am not disconnecting myself from the people I love. I am only allowing myself to also love myself. There's plenty of opportunities for you, for me, to connect with people I love. This is not a disconnection. I am not being mean. I'm caring for myself in a way that's very important. And understanding that and starting to rephrase it. So number 6, do you over-apologize? Oh my gosh, this is something that people used to tell me all the time. Michelle, stop saying sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I used to say sorry like 3 times in a sentence, frequently saying sorry for things that aren't your fault or are minor as a way to maintain harmony and avoid conflict is people pleasing. How often do you say, I'm sorry, right? I remember at work many, many years ago, still working as a therapist at that point. This is a good 15 years ago. We had this joke going on between us and staff, and people were like, I'm really good at, this is a terrible thing, but I'm really good at mimicking other people. Like I can kind of act that out. And someone else did it for me in return. And we were, it was all funny. It was all good and fun, but they just kept saying, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And they just kept apologizing as they were doing me. Right. And I was like, whoa, okay, good information. I needed to hear that. So really, I want to say to you, good information. You might need to look at this and see it and go, wow, awesome. I'm so glad I see this now so I can fix this. We don't need to apologize for things that are not our fault. We don't need to. And this is the other thing I want to say, because this is where we get a little rigid, right? We get rule following, right? So, okay, now I've told you this and you're like, oh yeah, I say sorry a lot. And so now you find yourself wanting to fix other people too. So people say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it. And you say, you don't need to be sorry. Please don't apologize. You need to stop apologizing, right? It's not your job to fix other people in this. And it's also okay if you say, I'm sorry, as a way of declining an invitation. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not able to make that. I'm not trying to make you the sorry Gestapo, but I do want you to look at how you might be overdoing. That's all. Just look at how you're overdoing. So as we move into number 7, you struggle with setting and enforcing boundaries. This is a good point for me to mention. Episode 15, Hey Empath, got guilt? How to stop it from sabotaging your boundaries. That's number 15. This was an awesome episode for you to listen to if you vibe with any of this stuff. You are going to get a lot from that, and it's going to kind of go in deeper into some of these areas for you to look at how guilt comes into play and what's going on with your boundaries. Okay. So you know that boundaries are important, but you have a hard time saying no or sticking to limits. And so I know I'm not going to dive into all the things around boundaries because I know, I talk about that so much, but I want to just talk about a couple of just examples for you to think about. So one is, do you over-explain when you're people-pleasing? This comes up. Do you over-explain decisions? So are you over-explaining, feeling the need to justify your choices in detail to others as a way to preemptively manage their reactions, right? Or again, always avoid conflict. So feeling the need to justify your choices. Do you go into over-explaining and not knowing that your decision is enough, right? That is a way that we would try to pull someone into hearing our decision and making them feel okay with it. Because we don't feel okay with it. So we feel this need to justify it. And so you go into preemptively trying to manage their reactions in it. And in this, you're kind of trying to control the outcome. Another sneaky example of how people-pleasing can come into play here can be when you are disguising advice as concern. So offering advice or help unasked, right? No one asked you, but you're offering this advice or help because you're concerned about how others will handle things, right? You don't know if you can trust how they're handling things, which can stem from a need to be needed, and you need to come in and sort of save or fix. This can stem from just really needing to be validated, which comes from our people-pleasing. And another one is feeling responsible for others' feelings, which, is another big one for us empaths, internally taking on the burden of managing others' emotions or reactions. And obviously, this is an easy trap for us empaths who are so in tune with others' emotions. But it's a step further when we use our gifts of empathy to fix other people. This can be a people-pleasing act as we reach for the reward of appreciation, remember that dangling carrot, and drawing worth from being helpful. There's a lot of times when we're in situations where we take on responsibility for others' feelings because we've been triggered to do so. And I've talked about this before, I believe, but it's when somebody starts behaving a certain way that our radar goes off, right? Like, this doesn't feel good. This isn't right. This person is obviously, maybe it's anger, maybe it's toxic behavior, right? We have a tendency to lean in versus lean out. And so when something bad happens, we want to understand and we want to fix it through our understanding, be the savior, save the day, get our worth, and alleviate the conflict. So I just want you to watch yourself with that. But it can also apply to when we try to control the outcomes on things. And now I have a story here that I'll share that can bring some light. And again, I'm trying to share with you nuances, different ways of seeing this that you can relate to that are outside the things you can Google. So here's one example. I was on a group text the other day for 4 of us, and we were going to go play pickleball. Yes, I've entered into the pickleball world. And I needed to back out as I pulled a muscle when I was working out that morning. And so I needed to cancel. And so my partner for the game continued to reach out to the group, working really hard to salvage the game. I could see them trying to control the outcome so that everyone would still play despite the obvious glitch of just 3 people because I was out. There was an energy of desperation in it, an emotional attachment to the outcome. That's where people pleasing can live, in that emotional attachment. They were working so hard to make sure that 1, nobody was disappointed. 2, they could be the savior, make it all happen anyway. And also 3, they were working hard so the other party would show their love and appreciation and say, yes, of course, we'll do with just you. This was an opportunity for them to feel loved and appreciated, that they would just show up for just that one person, right? Even though it's just going to be 3 of them that will show up for you. And that testing that can happen, I could feel that energy in the unfolding in it. And that is just our people-pleasing wound, right? All the things I just talked about, right? When we try to control the outcome, in some way, it felt like for this person, it would feel like a failure on their part if the other people said no. So when you are triggered to prove your worth, you may not take other people's feelings into consideration. Like, you're just driven by a need to make it happen because you need to feel that worth. And either way, versus, hey, either way, it's fine. I'm game, So instead of being like, we're going to do this, right? This is still going to happen and we can do this. Let's try these different things. And the energy in it of trying to control it and trying to get your need met is different than, hey, either way, it's fine. Just so you guys know, I'm game. We can be creative. We can play silly. Who cares? Like, I'm game. But also I understand if you don't want to. That's detachment from the outcome, right? That's be someone at ease. It can go either way, and I'm totally fine with that. I do not have a need here that you need to fulfill for me so that I can feel better. And so that's just an example. Now, number 8, you prioritize the needs of others over your own consistently. You frequently put others' needs ahead of your own, even though it negatively impacts your well-being. This probably sounds familiar. It may feel old, but being overly accommodating in relationships is a people-pleasing thing, obviously. So going along with others' plans, their timelines, their desires, in the relationship to avoid rocking the boat, even if it means sacrificing your own needs. This is big. So a sneaky people-pleasing habit that you might not have thought of is sort of avoiding confrontation under the guise of kindness. Avoiding confrontation under the guise of kindness. So not addressing issues directly because you don't want to seem harsh or unkind, but really it's about just avoiding the discomfort or the disapproval, right? Or avoiding expressing preferences, right? Downplaying or hiding your own preference to avoid inconveniencing others. People pleasers hate to be an inconvenience, even when it's about something small, like where do you want to eat? What activity do you want to do? they avoid expressing the preference. And also, do you frequently let people know how easy you are? Us people pleasers, there's many of us out there who will say, oh, you know me, I'm easy. They say it over and over again. It's part of their lingo, right? Don't worry about me. I'm super easy. AKA, I won't be difficult or needy or take up too much of your attention. And so this is a way that we just, this I'm easy is a way you've adapted in life to feel safe. People will like you. You won't be too much, right? And you wouldn't be behaving this way unless you were taught at some point that you were too much. And so, or maybe you witnessed somebody who was too much and you thought that's too much. I can't be them. And you had a vow not to be them. But either way, there's a wounding there. And your goal is not to be easy. That is not the gift. You are the gift, not you being easy. People knowing you and your preferences and who you are and what you like and what you don't like, that is the gift. But you being easy is not the gift. Take up space. Try to be a little difficult, right? Those of you that are really invested in being easy, I want you to try to be a little difficult. I want you, because that's just going to look normal, right? That's just going to look like everybody else who's not a people pleaser. But it's a hard thing to start trying, but I want you to take up a little more space. I want you to try to put yourself out there. I want you to say, hey, hold on a second, ask for assistance, or, put yourself out there. Maybe you're out to dinner with friends and I want you to say, I'd like to change my order, or I would like to try to ask for things and just see how it feels and look how you feel in your body when you're doing it. It's just a wonderful way for you to start expanding a little by little. One last thing I want to mention, another sneaky way that people pleasing can come into play is when we are a little bit overcritical of our kids or our partners. They may not be the same as you. So they may not be out to win everyone's approval in the same way that you are. And somehow our partners and kids become an extension of ourselves. So when they break our rules of engagement, right, we are potentially even mortified, or we become more critical of them because we want to get them in line so they and us are all loved and liked and safe. So as we wrap up, I want to highlight one last thing. Many people think you need to take a black or white or all or nothing approach in fixing this. It's either I'm a pushover or I'm so totally rigid with my boundaries that I'm not even supportive in my relationships, right? Or I don't know how to be supportive and also not people please. So it feels very black and white. Also, a lot of us don't know where to draw the power from in order to be brave and make the shifts. So a lot of us use anger and resentment, which are very power-driven emotions, to muster up the energy to set limits. So I want you to watch out for these things too. I am here to tell you there is a way to be graceful and loving as a boundaried person. At some point, as you expand your compassion and love for yourself, you'll see how kind and simple and transparent it is, how easier you are to read and be understood. It's actually quite kind to be clear. It's kind to share what you want with others and what you don't want. Will deepen your relationships and build trust with you. They can trust you. They don't have to second guess. Does she really mean that? People who aren't people pleasers find people pleasers kind of annoying sometimes because they don't even know how to read them. They're not sure what their true opinions are. It's almost like there's this lack of structure to it. They don't know what to hold on to. And so you learn as you do this with more compassion and love that this is a wonderful way to be. All right, as always, I wish you all the love and acceptance that you can find on this journey, and I will talk to you next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Into the Work Therapy for Empaths and Seekers. Don't forget to grab your free gift, your Shadow Work Transformation Bundle at michellepoverman.com. I've included everything you need to get started to break through the patterns of self-sabotage and finally start to heal the parts of yourself that are getting in the way of truly reaching your potential. From a powerful meditation designed to help you meet and embrace your shadow self, to the guide that's full of curated prompts and important questions to support you on this journey. This really can be the work for you to unmask the root cause of all the issues you've been experiencing, honestly, and start to feel free to believe in yourself and go for what you want. The link for this free bundle is in the show notes. And if you like this episode, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment and rate, click and follow, and leave a review. Of course, you can always follow me on socials at Michelle Poverman. And keep in mind, as you embark on your journey from spark to brilliance, remember, the universe is always conspiring in favor of your awakening. Everything that's happening is in support of you lighting your own fire within. So until we meet again, may your path be well lit and your heart be guided. Shine bright, seekers. Until next time.